They say when you marry a man, you marry his family. But no one warns you about what to do when your future mother-in-law is a literal monster hiding behind pearls and a country club membership. My name is Sarah. Exactly 1 week before my dream wedding, I walked into the guest room of my fiancé's family estate and found my late grandmother's antique wedding veil shredded into hundreds of tiny pieces. My future mother-in-law, Eleanor, stood there with a fake gasp, blaming it on rats. But rats don't use titanium fabric scissors. She thought she had broken me. She thought I would cancel the wedding and run away crying. She was wrong. I didn't cry. Instead, I dug into her past, uncovered a devastating financial secret, and turned my wedding reception into the stage for her absolute destruction. Welcome to the day I ruined my evil mother-in-law's life in front of 200 of her closest, wealthiest friends. To understand why Eleanor hated me so much, you have to understand where I came from. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I grew up in a tiny, cramped apartment. My father was a mechanic, and my mother worked night shifts as a nurse just to keep the lights on. I learned the value of $1 before I even knew how to ride a bike. Through pure grit, I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college and eventually became a senior financial manager at a top firm in the city. Then I met David. David was everything I had ever dreamed of: kind, brilliant, and deeply supportive. He also happened to be the heir to a massive real estate fortune. But he never acted like it. We fell in love instantly. However, the fairy tale screeched to a halt the day I met his mother, Eleanor. Eleanor was the textbook definition of a toxic elitist. When David introduced us at their sprawling country estate, she didn't even stand up. She looked me up and down, her eyes stopping at my mid-range designer shoes, and let out a soft, mocking sigh. A financial manager? How practical, she sneered, taking a sip of her expensive champagne. I suppose people from your background have to be obsessed with money since you never had any. David usually dates girls from our circle. Girls who understand legacy. I swallowed the lump in my throat and smiled politely. I thought if I just showed her respect, she would eventually warm up to me. I had no idea she was already plotting to get rid of me. The psychological warfare officially began at our engagement dinner. David and I had rented a beautiful private dining room at a high-end restaurant to celebrate with both of our families. It was supposed to be intimate. But when the doors opened, Eleanor walked in with an uninvited guest. It was Jessica, David's ex-girlfriend. Jessica was a billionaire's daughter, dripping in diamonds and old money arrogance. "Oh, I hope you don't mind, Sarah," Eleanor said loudly, ensuring the whole room could hear. Jessica just got back from Paris, and she's practically family. I knew David would be thrilled to see her. My parents looked incredibly uncomfortable in their modest suits. David immediately stood up, his jaw clenched. "Mom, this is highly inappropriate. Jessica shouldn't be here." But Jessica had already glided over, placing a hand on David's arm. "Oh, don't be mad, Davy. Your mom insisted. And wow, this place is cute. A little cramped, but cute." For the next 2 hours, Eleanor completely ignored me and my parents. She spent the entire dinner loudly reminiscing about David and Jessica's past vacations in Monaco, pointing out how perfect their genetics would have been together. She was intentionally trying to make me feel small, cheap, and replaceable. David held my hand tightly under the table and eventually asked Jessica to leave, but the damage was done. Eleanor had drawn her battle lines. As the wedding approached, the sabotage escalated from passive-aggressive comments to deliberate attacks. Because David and I wanted full control, we were paying for the entire wedding ourselves. But Eleanor demanded to be the point of contact for the vendors to feel involved. Like a fool, I let her handle the florist. Our theme was classic elegance, thousands of pure white peonies, white roses, and lush greenery. I had already paid the $8,000 deposit. 2 days before the wedding, the floral delivery arrived at the venue for setup. I walked into the ballroom and instantly froze. My heart dropped into my stomach. There were no white peonies. The entire ballroom was filled with funeral flowers. Massive arrangements of cheap white chrysanthemums and pitch-black, dyed roses. It looked like a graveyard. It looked like someone had died. I immediately called the florist, hyperventilating. What is this? Where are my white roses? The florist sounded terrified. Ma'am, your future mother-in-law called 3 days ago. She said the bride had a gothic, dark phase she wanted to honor and explicitly demanded we change the order to black roses and funeral mums. She authorized it with the vendor passcode. I confronted Eleanor in the hallway. She just gave me a sickeningly sweet smile. Oh, sweetheart, I thought the black suited your personality so much better. You know, a little rough around the edges. Besides, it's too late to change it now. You'll just have to make do with what you have. That's what your people are good at, right? The flowers were a cruel joke, but what she did next was unforgivable. I only had one family heirloom. It was a delicate, hand-embroidered lace veil that my late grandmother had worn on her wedding day. It was my something old, and it meant the absolute world to me. I had carefully stored it in a protective garment bag in the guest room of Eleanor's estate, where the bridesmaids and I were supposed to get ready. The afternoon before the rehearsal dinner, I went to check on my dress. I unzipped the garment bag. The veil didn't just fall out, it spilled onto the floor in ribbons. It had been brutally hacked to pieces. Someone had taken scissors and completely shredded the delicate antique lace until it was nothing but useless, jagged scraps. I dropped to my knees, holding the destroyed lace, tears burning my eyes. My grandmother was gone, and now the only piece of her I had left was gone too. Eleanor sauntered into the room, holding a cup of tea. She looked down at the shredded veil and delivered the worst acting performance of her life. Oh, dear God, she gasped, covering her mouth. It must have been the estate rats. We've had a terrible rodent problem in the West Wing. Or, well, maybe the fabric was just so old and cheap that it fell apart on its own. What a shame. I looked at the perfectly straight scissor cuts. Rats don't cut in straight lines. At that exact moment, the sadness evaporated. The tears stopped. A cold, absolute rage took over my body. Eleanor thought she was dealing with a weak, poor girl she could bully into submission. She forgot she was dealing with a senior financial manager who knew how to audit, investigate, and destroy. I slowly stood up, wiped my face, and looked her dead in the eye. You're right, Eleanor. It's just an old, cheap thing. I'll buy a new one. I didn't scream. I didn't tell David. Because right then and there, I decided I wasn't just going to cancel the wedding. I was going to let her walk right into the trap she built for me. The war had officially begun. They say the best revenge is living well. I disagree. The best revenge is letting your enemy dig their own grave, handing them a customized shovel, and then broadcasting the burial live. Eleanor thought I was a naive little girl from the wrong side of the tracks. She forgot that my job as a senior financial manager literally involved hunting down corporate fraud and destroying white-collar criminals. I didn't shed a single tear over my shredded veil. Instead, I went to work. My first move was to find out exactly what else she had planned for the actual wedding day. I needed inside access. That evening, while the family was having tea in the sunroom, I slipped into the grand foyer where Eleanor had left her precious $25,000 Hermes Birkin bag. With lightning speed, I dropped a military-grade, voice-activated audio bug into the deep-zippered pocket of her bag. It was the size of a coin. For the next 48 hours, I listened to every single conversation she had. The breakthrough came on Thursday afternoon. Through my earpiece, I heard Eleanor's voice, followed by the unmistakable, high-pitched giggle of Jessica, David's billionaire ex-girlfriend. Is the dress ready, darling? Eleanor asked. Yes, Eleanor. It's a custom Vera Wang. Pure white, long train. I'm going to look more like a bride than the actual bride, Jessica laughed maliciously. Perfect, Eleanor. Purred. When the organ starts playing the bridal chorus, you will walk down the aisle right before Sarah does. David will see you in that dress, realize the massive mistake he's making with that cheap little gold digger, and call off the wedding. I've already paid the security guards to let you in. My blood ran ice cold. She wasn't just trying to annoy me, she was orchestrating a public humiliation to destroy my relationship at the altar. I saved the audio file to my secure cloud. Checkmate number 1. But audio recordings weren't enough. I wanted to completely annihilate her standing in the high society she worshipped. I hired a highly discreet private investigator, a former forensic accountant I sometimes worked with. I gave him Eleanor's name and told him to dig into her personal finances. I had noticed something odd. Her luxury credit cards were frequently getting declined at local boutiques, and she was always intercepting the mail before her husband could see it. 24 hours later, my investigator handed me a thick manila folder. What I saw inside made me gasp out loud. Eleanor, the snobby, elitist matriarch who looked down on my working-class family, was completely and utterly broke. She had a massive, secret gambling addiction. Over the last 5 years, she had lost millions in offshore online casinos and high-stakes underground poker games. But it got worse. To cover her debts and maintain her fake billionaire lifestyle, she had committed felony wire fraud. She had secretly forged her husband's signature and embezzled over $850,000 from his private retirement fund. She was a criminal. And I had the bank statements, the IP addresses, and the forged documents to prove it. I looked at the red numbers on the spreadsheet and smiled. I had the nuclear launch codes. Just when I thought I had all the ammunition I needed, Eleanor delivered her final blow. On the morning of the wedding rehearsal, my phone rang. It was the premium catering company we had hired for our 200 elite guests. The manager was frantic. "Sarah, I am so confused. Your mother-in-law just called and screamed at us, canceling the entire $35,000 food order for tomorrow's reception. She demanded the partial refund be wired to her personal account. We have no food prepped for your wedding." Eleanor's plan was brilliant in its cruelty. She wanted me to arrive at the reception with 200 hungry, judgmental billionaires and absolutely no food to serve them. She wanted me to look like an incompetent, poor bride who couldn't even afford to feed her guests. "Don't worry," I told the manager calmly. "Keep the refund. The cancellation stands." Instead of panicking, I picked up the phone and called a client of mine, a world-renowned, 3-Michelin star chef who owed me a massive favor for saving his restaurant group from bankruptcy. I paid him $50,000 out of my own private savings to secretly take over the kitchen at our venue. I told his team to stay completely hidden until the exact moment I gave the signal. Eleanor thought I was starving. She had no idea a culinary masterpiece was waiting in the shadows. The rehearsal dinner was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Eleanor was practically glowing. She wore a stunning emerald green gown, sipping her champagne and playing the role of the loving mother perfectly. She looked at me with fake, sickening pity. In her mind, she had already won. Tomorrow, the venue would be filled with funeral flowers. Jessica would walk down the aisle in a wedding dress to steal the groom. And if the wedding somehow proceeded, there would be zero food at the reception. She thought she had pushed me into a corner. During the toasts, she stood up and clinked her glass. "To Sarah," Eleanor said smoothly, her eyes locked onto mine with a venomous glint. "Marriage is full of unexpected surprises and challenges. I just hope you are prepared for whatever tomorrow brings. Because, darling, I have a feeling it's going to be a day no one will ever forget." The guests clapped politely. David squeezed my hand, completely unaware of the war happening right in front of him. I stood up, raising my own glass of sparkling water. I looked at the woman who had tormented me, insulted my family, and tried to destroy my future. I felt the USB drive burning a hole in my evening bag, the drive containing her criminal records and her audio confessions. "Thank you, Eleanor," I smiled warmly, my voice ringing clear across the room. "You have no idea how right you are. Tomorrow is going to be historic. And I promise you, you will get exactly what you deserve." I drank my water. "Drink your champagne, Eleanor," I thought to myself. "Because it's the last glass you'll ever have as a free, respected woman." The morning of the wedding arrived. The sky was crystal clear, but a massive storm was about to hit the venue. I stood in the bridal suite, adjusting my backup dress, a stunning, sleek silk gown I had bought with my own money. I looked in the mirror. I wasn't just a bride today, I was the executioner. The ceremony began. 200 of the city's most elite residents sat in the pews. David stood at the altar, looking incredibly handsome. Eleanor sat in the front row, literally vibrating with malicious excitement. The organist began to play the traditional bridal chorus. The heavy oak doors at the back of the church swung open. Everyone stood up and turned around. But it wasn't me. It was Jessica. She was wearing a massive, custom Vera Wang wedding dress, a diamond tiara, and carrying a bouquet of white lilies. She locked eyes with David and began a slow, dramatic walk down the aisle. Eleanor smirked, waiting for David to fall to his knees and beg his rich ex-girlfriend to take him back. But David didn't look mesmerized. He looked completely disgusted. And Eleanor forgot one tiny detail. I was the one who hired the security team. Before Jessica could take her fifth step, two massive, 6'4" bouncers dressed in black suits stepped out from the shadows. They didn't ask her to leave. They grabbed her by both arms and literally lifted her off the ground. What are you doing? Unhand me. David. Tell them to stop. Jessica shrieked, her legs kicking wildly in the air, her diamond tiara falling onto the marble floor. Eleanor jumped up, her face pale. Stop. She is a VIP guest. But the bouncers dragged the screaming, humiliated billionaire's daughter right out the front doors and locked them. The church was dead silent. 10 seconds later, the music restarted. The doors opened again. And I walked down the aisle completely flawless. David smiled, with tears in his eyes, and whispered, "You look perfect." Strike one, Eleanor. The ceremony was beautiful, but the real show was at the reception. We entered the grand ballroom. Eleanor looked stressed, but still had a smug look on her face. She kept glancing at her watch, waiting for the dinner service to begin. She was waiting for the disaster. At 7:30 p.m., the catering staff was nowhere to be seen. The tables were empty. Eleanor saw her moment. She grabbed a microphone, put on her best fake sympathetic face, and stood in the center of the room. "Excuse me, everyone," Eleanor announced, her voice dripping with fake sorrow. "I am so terribly embarrassed to announce this. It seems our inexperienced bride failed to properly secure the catering. Unfortunately, there is no food tonight. I suppose managing a budget is difficult when you aren't used to having money." The guests began to whisper. My parents looked mortified. Eleanor looked at me, a victorious sneer on her lips. I picked up my glass and clinked it with my spoon. "Eleanor, thank you for your concern. But I actually handled the menu myself." I snapped my fingers. The double doors to the kitchen violently swung open. A line of 40 waiters in crisp, immaculate white uniforms marched out in perfect synchronization. Leading them was Chef Pierre, a world-renowned 3-Michelin star chef. They began serving 200 plates of lobster thermidor, Wagyu beef medallions, and black truffle risotto. The guests gasped in absolute awe. It was the most luxurious feast anyone in that room had ever seen. Eleanor's jaw literally dropped to the floor. She looked like she had just seen a ghost. Her $35,000 sabotage attempt had just been crushed by my $50,000 masterpiece. Strike two. It was time for the speeches. It was time for the kill. I walked up to the main stage, grabbing the microphone. Behind me was a massive, 300-inch LED screen. The room went quiet. I want to dedicate this toast to the woman who made this day so unforgettable. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, I said smoothly. Eleanor forced a tight smile, raising her glass. Eleanor wanted to give David and me a special wedding gift. But I think everyone here deserves to share it, I continued. I pressed a button on my remote. The massive LED screen didn't show a slideshow of our childhood photos. The screen went pitch black and an audio file began to play at maximum volume over the concert-grade speakers. When the organ starts playing, Jessica will walk down the aisle. David will realize the massive mistake he's making with that cheap little gold digger. Eleanor's venomous voice echoed through the ballroom, followed by Jessica's high-pitched giggles. The entire room gasped. People covered their mouths. Eleanor dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the floor. But wait, there's more, I said coldly. I pressed the button again. The screen flashed bright red. Massive, high-resolution images of bank statements, wire transfers, and offshore casino receipts filled the 300-inch display. At the very top, in bold letters, was a forensic audit report. You see, Eleanor thinks I am poor. But as a financial manager, I know how to read the numbers. And the numbers say that Eleanor has secretly forged her husband's signature and embezzled $850,000 from his retirement fund to cover her illegal gambling debts. She is completely, utterly bankrupt. Chaos erupted. David's father, Arthur, stood up, his face purple with absolute rage. He looked at the screen, recognizing his own forged signature on the documents. He slowly turned to his wife. You stole my pension?" Arthur's voice shook the room. "I'm ruined because of you?" "Arthur, no. It's a lie. She fabricated it." Eleanor screamed, tears ruining her expensive makeup. She turned to David, desperately grabbing his tuxedo jacket. "David, please. Throw her out. She's trying to destroy our family." David looked at his mother, the woman who had tried to ruin his wedding, humiliate his wife, and rob his father. He gently, but firmly, peeled her hands off his jacket. "You destroyed this family, Mom," David said coldly. He turned to the heavy-set men standing at the doors. "Security. Escort this thief out of my wedding." Eleanor fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. The two bouncers walked over, grabbed the former queen of high society by the arms, and dragged her out of the ballroom while 200 of her wealthiest friends watched in absolute, disgusted silence. Arthur announced right then and there that he was filing for divorce and pressing criminal charges. As the doors slammed shut behind her, the heavy tension in the room broke. I turned to my husband. The DJ, reading the room perfectly, dropped a massive, upbeat dance track. David pulled me into his arms and kissed me under the chandeliers. The toxic shadows were gone forever. The $100,000 wedding was worth every single penny. And the look on Eleanor's face as she realized the cheap little gold digger had just ended her entire existence? That was priceless.